Hi everyone, today we're looking at Unit 3, Lesson 10, History Basics. Here are our objectives and standards which you can pause to read. Measuring time. Historians use timelines as a tool. A timeline is a line marked off with a series of events and dates. Historians use timelines to put events in a chronology, a list of events in an order which they occurred. Timelines help historians identify and make sense of patterns of change. Historians also are able to analyze continuity across time and space by studying timelines. Continuity shows what has stayed the same over time, or the opposite of change. For example, a society might continue to use the same language, while other aspects of their culture might change. Here's an example of a timeline. As you can see, there's a title showing key legislation affecting American Indians between the years of 1800 and the year 2000. On the timeline, it shows multiple events and their dates in which they occurred. Now let's look at primary versus secondary sources. Primary sources have information that comes directly from a person who experienced an event. These could be letters, diaries, photographs, or artifacts, which are objects. Secondary sources have information about an event that does not come from the person who experienced that event. These could be news articles or history books. They're coming from primary sources and then rewording them into a secondary source. Evaluating historical sources. Historical sources do not always give a true account of events. Even primary sources can be wrong or misleading. A writer's personal opinions may influence what he or she writes. Sometimes the person recording the event may not present all details accurately. Historians must evaluate sources, looking at them in the light of what is known from other sources. A historian must also be cautious when using secondary sources. Not all secondary sources are equally valid or reliable. For example, the internet includes millions of well-researched articles, books, and other reliable secondary sources. However, any internet search will also find many inaccurate websites. When looking at a source, ask yourself 3 questions. Who created the source? Is this fact or opinion? And what biases do they have? Now let's look at how to evaluate a historical source such as a map. Read the title. Note the date, the time span, and other information about the subject of the map. If the map includes a locator map, examine it to see what the region is shown. If we look at our map to the right, we can see the title is Incan Empire 1525 to 1533, and there's a locator map showing us that this is South America. Study the map quickly to get a general idea of what is shown. Read any place names and other labels. Note all landforms. On our map, we have several locations. We have the Caribbean Sea, the Amazon River, we have a lake, we have a city name, and we have a mountain range, as well as the Pacific Ocean. Examine the map's key. Pick out the first symbol or other entry, read what it stands for, and find an example on the map. Repeat this process for the remaining key entries until you understand them all. The keys of historical maps may show more than one color, each one representing a different territory. Use the colors to understand how space was divided in the past. This key shows, in orange, the Incan Empire. We also have an arrow showing Pizarro's route, and we have a dot representing cities. We also have a key here showing us the distance and the proportions of this map. It also tells us that this is using the equal area projection. So on the map, if we look, we have this orange region that follows along the coast of South America. We can also find Pizarro's route using the arrow and the city which he landed in, which is marked with the black dot. Finally, let's look at the difference between archaeology and anthropology. Archaeology is the scientific study of past cultures through examination of artifacts and other evidence. These people explore places people lived in and worked in. They study artifacts to learn how people lived. An anthropologist studies humans in all aspects, but especially their culture and development. They study bones and fossils They research into historical records, and they network with museums and universities. An example of an archaeologist would be someone going to a site such as Pompeii and excavating the site, looking at the buildings, the structures, and the artifacts that they find buried underneath the earth. An anthropologist would take that information and look at the culture, examining what all of that means, and using the historical record to derive inferences based on what the culture would have been like, and then sharing that with museums and universities.